It's interesting if you have this big desire, whatever it is, if your desire is big enough, you'll get to where you want to go. I started with property and people started noticing like I'm doing the investment thing and everyone asked the same questions over and over again. I decided let me try and put myself into the most awkward situation and start a YouTube channel and educate people.
I've been walking around, waiting for you to shine. People passing me by.
What's up, Louis? It's Guys here. It's nice to have you on the podcast. My name is Stefan. This is Louis. We're going to have a chat about some interesting real estate things, how to make money, how the world of buying property works. And I have some really interesting questions for you today, Louis. The first thing is, when you buy a property, is it really worth it to buy instead of rent?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Stefan. I think that's a great question. I think that's a question that a lot of people ask. It really depends on your exact situation. I think it's different for each and every individual, depending on your age, your risk appetite, and basically where you're at in life. Overall, renting is definitely cheaper in the short term. I think overall, it's just a good option to consider buying a property eventually. But at the end of the day, it can be a much cheaper option and easier to rent instead of actually buying a property.
The property we are in right now, we're paying 14,900 Rand a month rent.
Oh, it's quite expensive.
And the guy wants to sell it for 2 million and I think 2.1 million or something like that.
Yeah.
And this is a 3-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
basically. Do you think it's better to go and buy a property, spend the money that we're paying on rent here on a property to buy, a bond?
Yeah, so there's a quick rule that I use. It's called the 1% rule. So in that exact same example, if you have a property worth 2.2 million Rand and the owner's only asking 15,000 Rand for rent, he's technically losing quite a bit of money each and every month, especially if the property is still bonded. So you can do the calculation. If you have a property worth 2.2 million Rand, it should be rented for at least 22,000 Rand, which is 1% of the purchase value. If you can't rent it for at least 1%, you are basically have a shortfall on that property. So in that exact situation, it's cheaper to rent that specific property compared to actually buying it. Because if you buy it for 2.2 million, 3-year bond, prime rate, with rates and taxes and all the other costs involved, it's going to cost you a lot more than 15,000 Rand.
I get you.
So you can get better value for less, but it's obviously not your property.
Yeah.
No.
And some people always say that, listen, no, if you buy a property for, say, let's take an example, 2 million Rand. If you buy a property for 2 million Rand and you're paying off, let's say, 20,000 Rand a month on that bond, which is more or less what you're going to be doing. And that 20,000 Rand a month over the next 10 years is better in your own pocket than it is in the person who owns the property's pocket. But what people don't always realize is on that bond, you're paying interest. And a 2 million Rand property bond over 30 years ends up being like almost 10 million Rand that you have to pay back.
It's a lot of interest, yeah.
That's a lot of, so
That's a lot of interest.
Theoretically, over 30 years, you have to sell that property again for 10 million Rand instead of 2 million Rand. And then people say, oh no, I made so much profit on this property. I bought it for 2 and sold it for 10. But meanwhile, you're actually just making back your interest.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a huge difference between, an asset and a liability. And I think like older generations think that owning your property outright is an asset from the beginning. But at the end of the day, you're the person that's going to have to pay for that property, meaning you are the one that has to pay for the interest. So short term, it just doesn't make sense to pay all that interest for just to say that you own a property, but at the end of the day, it's you that need to pay for it. So there's a difference between owning a home and owning an investment property that someone else pays the interest, and you can hopefully get cash flow from that property as well at the end of the month. So there's a big difference, but it all depends on your exact situation and which direction you actually want to go.
Yeah, I guess there's 2 reasons to buy a property. Reason number 1 is for yourself, and reason number 2 is to become a cash-generating asset.
To use it as an investment.
Which is a very good idea for some people.
Absolutely.
However, I think people underestimate the amount of time they need to spend on managing these properties. For example, you just told me outside of the podcast, and maybe you can tell the people again today, what is it exactly that you do on a day-to-day? What is your day job?
Yeah, so I do the YouTube on the side, and I mainly focus on investing in property. So I do multi-lets and I do student accommodation. So it's kind of more of a passive type of income. So I'm not involved in the business too much. I have a few things going on as well, like I mentioned with the farming, with the cattle and stuff, which is completely different. But at the end of the day, I manage people that work for me in the property business. So I focus on multi-lets and student accommodation. So I use property as an investment vehicle. I do own my primary residence as well, but I see that as a liability and not an asset. Yeah, so that's basically what I do.
All right. And your YouTube channel, how long ago did you start it?
I'm not exactly sure. I think it's more than 2.5 years now. Yeah.
And probably like 600 videos deep, or how many?
No, I think it's like 228 or something like
And
that.
already on 40,000 subscribers.
Yeah,
That's something.
but that includes shorts and stuff as
Yeah,
well.
shorts
Yeah.
changed the game for everybody.
Yeah.
What's your channel's name again?
It's Reynhardt, just my name and surname. Yeah, so it's funny how I started with the channel. I started with property and people started noticing like I'm doing the investment thing and everyone asked the same questions over and over again. And I decided, let me try and put myself into the most awkward situation and start a YouTube channel and educate people. So that was quite fun.
I think
actually.
education is key, like provide value up front always.
Yeah,
You told me that
absolutely.
eventually you also decided, listen, all of this information that you have on the videos, you condensed it into a PDF and that's a course now.
Yeah, so it's a video course actually which goes into more depth and like more of the detailed stuff that's not always as interesting to watch for everyone. But yeah, it covers like from the start up until the end, focusing on the stuff that's really important, the fundamentals, and stuff that you can't skip to get started with property.
So one of the reasons I wanted you on the podcast today is because we just got our first property.
Okay, cool, man. That's a big step.
Yeah, it's a massive step. So I'll give you all of the details of this property, and then you can guesstimate what's going on.
Okay.
All right. So firstly, the property is in Linwood Manor, so it's right down the street here, and it's quite a good property or a good area. It's on a main street. It's a 2,000 square property. It was built in 1968.
Okay, wow.
Right? We have all of the building plans. Everything is on the plans.
Great.
However, the roof is, what is it called? Lap? What is that, like sealant that they put on the roofs?
Yeah,
Like
Lass and
cloth.
Lap.
Yeah, like there's a cloth that they put over the whole roof
Yeah,
for
yeah.
some random reason, because
Okay.
I think because it started leaking or whatever. And the rest of the property, there's a swimming pool. I think it's a 3-bedroom, 3 garage, big living room property, and it's against a hill. And that's like all of the information I can give you. Can you guess the price we paid for this 2,000 square property?
Oh, 2,000 squares is large. What's the size of the floor plan size? Do you know?
460 squares.
Wow, yeah, that's big. I'm not sure. I think probably close to like 2.5 million, 3 million. I'm not sure. I don't know the prices that
Yeah,
much.
the area. So
yeah.
that, I think that's one of the most important things is you have to do research on the area.
It's different everywhere.
So
Specifically in Gauteng, I think it's a weird market.
Yeah, everything's like literally 2 kilometers left,
Yeah.
and it's like half the price for the
Yeah.
house. So I'll give you some more information. The house on the right sold for 6.2 million, and the house on the
Jeez.
left sold for 3.8 million.
Oh, so probably close to 4 million rand.
That's what you'd think. But
Yeah.
we paid 2.1 for it.
Okay, well, bargain. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's exactly what you want to do. Buy it for less than it's actually worth.
Yeah, so because the house is a little bit run down, the people, I don't know what happened, but
Yeah.
the house is a little bit run down, so we bought a fixer-upper.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And I'm excited for it, but
Yeah.
now the problem comes. I'm very busy on my day to day. Like, I sit in front of my laptop for 90% of my day. And that's not the 9 to 5. That's until 10, 12, whatever in the evenings.
Yeah.
So now for me to manage the fixer-upper and my actual job is quite a big task. That's also something I think people underestimate.
Absolutely.
Is they think, oh no, I'll buy a fixer-upper, it's going to be awesome. The headaches that comes with a fixer-upper is next level.
Yeah. The problems that you face when like renovating a property or fixing a property, you think you have to do this, and at the end of the day, there's so many things that, you know, adds up that you need to do. So it takes a lot of time, and it's not as easy as it sounds, as fun as it sounds always. But I think it's a very rewarding process.
What would your biggest tips be for renovating a fixer-upper? What do you need to keep in mind?
I think, you know, you'll have to have some good team members. That's super important. Having someone that can help you, that you can trust, that you know is actually good in what they do. Not using the cheapest guy on the street to help you fix whatever it is. I think that's a big one because people always choose the cheapest quote to fix stuff. I mean, I'm assuming you won't be doing everything on your own. Maybe there's some stuff you'll do on your own, which is fun and fine. Yeah, I think running the numbers is super important. You know,
Yeah, I see you do spreadsheets all the time.
Yeah, with renovations it's difficult because there's always extra cost. So what I do is, if you have a renovation budget, let's say it's 500,000 rand, I would add 20% to that automatically for, that extra margin of safety. Because there's, for example, if you want to tile the floor and you lift up the old tiles, you might see a foundation crack or something that needs more attention, and that adds to your budget. So there's always extra stuff that adds on to your initial renovation budget. I think that's another big one. I'm not too big into the renovations, like large-scale renovations, but I think focus on doing quality work with the important stuff. If you have to fix a roof, that's something that's supposed to, work for the next 30 or 40 years. So don't go and buy the cheapest, let's say you want to use rubber sealant. Don't buy the cheapest thing just to get it done. Rather pay for quality products or services on the fundamentals, the stuff that's really important, instead of just kind of rushing into it and finishing the project.
What's something you should never do when you upgrade a property? Or something that you should watch out for? Something that people like that happens because of not knowing better?
Oh, that's one of the things, using the cheapest guy.
Yeah.
Because you end up paying cheaper in the beginning, but in the longer term you lose money. That's just how it works. I think something else, again, it depends on the type of renovation. If you want to renovate for yourself, for your business, you want nice fixtures, you want the best of the best, that makes sense. But a lot of the time people over renovate. So, for example, I renovate properties for rental grade. So it's rental grade renovation. So I technically want to renovate it in the quickest, the best looking, but still the most affordable way, so that it still makes sense to rent out that property. In that exact scenario, people over renovate their properties and spend way too much money. And at the end of the day, whether they are using it as an investment or whatever, the money generated from the property is not enough to cover all of the renovation costs. So it's just important to not over renovate, basically.
Yeah, over renovating. That's number 4.
Yeah, let's call that number 4.
Don't over renovate.
Don't over renovate. Yeah.
And what's something that happens during the buying process of a property that people walk into without knowing, like something that they get caught offside?
I think an interesting one is, and this is out of experience, something called a bank initiation fee. Obviously people know of bond and registration costs, or some of the people do, but that's obviously one of them as well, bond and registration costs. But above that, you get a bank initiation fee that you need to either pay directly to the bank or add it onto your initial loan. So that can depend. If you buy it in your own name, it's usually around 6,000 Rand additional money that you need to pay. Or if you own it or buy the property in a trust or a company, it can go up to 11 or 12,000 Rand additional money that you need to pay just to initiate the loan with the bank. So that's extra cost that you need to account for, because a lot of people don't know of that money. And something small, it adds up at the end of the day, is monthly fees for the bank. Standard Bank charges, I think, 69 Rand for a monthly fee, meaning you pay them that money just to administrate your loan on a month-to-month basis. Someone like Absa, for example, charges 220 Rand for a monthly fee just to manage your bond. And imagine 220 Rand over a 30-year period or 360 months with interest. That's a lot of money at the end of the day, and that's something that a lot of people miss.
That is so. I'm just looking up our bond now to see if I can figure out. So
where did you get the bond? Or
we got it with Investec.
Okay, wow, that's cool.
And I think it's part of a young entrepreneurs program that they have, which is quite cool. And I think because I'm a first-time homeowner, I also get discounts.
Yeah, they can. Some people even give you like 110% loan. So they can give you a loan for the bond and transfer cost as well. But that's only applicable in your personal name.
And unfortunately, I own my own companies.
Yeah.
So you ain't getting no 100% loans.
Absolutely
I got
not.
90%, which is as much as any bank.
It's still, I mean, for 2.5 million Rand, it's still a large portion that's covered by the bank. And that's one of the advantages, is getting that leverage or proving to the bank that you can pay it back. I mean, imagine you had to pay 2.5 million or 2.1 million before you can own a property. No one will own property.
Yeah. This is actually quite an expensive acquisition of property for us.
Absolutely.
Because we have to pay 10% of the value of the property.
So that's 210,000 Rand
down. Then transfer fees on the 2 million Rand property is probably like 140,000 Rand or something.
That's a lot.
So add that on top, that's like we're almost, with all in all, I'm gonna guess we're gonna turn around 400,000 Rand just to get this property or just to get a bond
Yeah,
on
just,
a property and have the
absolutely.
property.
Yeah, it's
So
expensive.
people don't think about the fact that it's not just having the monthly money available to pay for the bond. It's all of these registration fees. Transfer fees on a property is ridiculously high.
That's a lot. The more the property is worth, the more it gets. And another thing that's interesting is transfer duty. So you can buy a property without transfer duty for less than 1.1 million rand. I think they increased that. So anything that you buy above 1.1 million, you'll have to pay transfer duty as well. So that goes directly to SARS, which is terrible.
Yeah, I have that as well. I think it's like 40 or 60,000
Yeah,
rand or something.
it adds up. It's a lot of money. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people say that when you buy a property, you should kind of transfer it into a trust and not into your own name. However, if you get the bond in your own name from the bank, can you then still transfer the property into a trust instead of your own name?
Yeah, so great question. The short answer is yes, you can, but there's cost involved. So ideally, you would start off with the right structure, but what happens a lot of time is people buy the property in their own name and later realize that it makes more sense in a different entity. So you can transfer it, but it will be an actual sale of the property again. So the first entity will have to, or the new entity will physically have to buy the property from yourself, and you'll have to pay all the transfer costs again, which is basically unnecessary because of, let's say you have to pay 140,000 rand again, or close to that. That just doesn't make sense. I think with a company, it's something called a share swap, or asset for share swap. So you can acquire an asset from someone's personal name and swap it for shares in a company. That's a different process, but again, there's still fees involved with stuff like that.
But the trust, say for example, it's a brand new trust, it doesn't have any equity, it doesn't have anything
No
to
financials,
back
no.
out. So how, is it then possible to transfer it over? How will that company buy from you?
Yeah, so that's why it's not as wise to follow that route. Ideally, you would structure it in a way where you set up a company or a trust, and in your personal name, you'll sign surety for the trust. Because the trust doesn't have financials at that stage, it's not a running trust or running business. So the trust itself can't prove to the bank that it can afford a loan, right? So you have to sign surety in your personal name for the trust. It's like being a director of a company and telling the bank, I want to buy it in this entity, but I will be the one that's liable for the debt at the end of the day. But by doing that, as soon as you own the property in your property trust or your company will grow, and eventually you can get to a point where you don't have to sign surety anymore. That's the idea of investment properties. So yeah, but I mean, I always say there's many advantages to owning a property in a trust or in a company. There's only a few to owning it in your personal name. But with that said, if you are someone that only wants to own one property, then it makes sense. But I mean, I want to own 100, 200, 300 properties. So I want to structure my property portfolio like a business. And running a business, you need separate accounts, you need team members, you need, different ways to funnel money, obviously legally, so that you can have the most growth potential. That's basically, so I'm not sure if you know the advantages of like of a trust or a company. So there's 4 advantages to owning a property in a different entity. The first one is growth potential. At the end of the day, you will have more affordability when buying properties in a trust or a company, meaning the banks will, at the end of the day, lend more money to you instead or compared to owning the property in your own name. The second one is tax benefits. There's many tax advantages to owning it in a different entity. It obviously depends on the exact situation, but there's stuff like in a trust, something called a conduit principle, where you can transfer your profits from the trust to an individual, and that individual pays income tax in his own name. So a trust pays 45% tax, and a company is 27% tax, and obviously income tax is 18 to 45%. So most of the time people think, wow, a trust has 45% tax, but at the end of the day, you won't actually pay 45% tax on the income on the trust, because there's so many different ways to move your money around. Another example is having a loan from a company to a trust, and a loan is not taxable. So I will, for example, lend money from my name or my company's name to my trust, let's call it 100,000 rand. My company or my trust ends up making 100,000 rand profit. That loan needs to be repaid to my company with interest. So at the end of the day, that's a tax deduction. You don't have to pay tax on a loan. So it's growth potential tax. Another one is estate planning. So if you die, it's very expensive to die in South Africa. I'm not sure if you know, but with a trust specifically, because it's a living trust, your assets can continue on if you pass away. Where if you own anything in your own name, if you pass away, that asset forms part of your will and testament. So you will have to go through the whole estate planning process where the banks will have to settle all the debts and make sure where should this thing go to, who gets this asset, and so on. With a trust, your property portfolio can simply continue to, function instead of having to go through that whole estate planning or estate process. And then lastly, the fourth one is asset protection. So obviously, if I had to ever come into some issue where someone wants to sue me or take hold of my assets, you have some form of protection when owning the assets in a different entity compared to in your own personal name. So that's just the four main advantages to a separate entity.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, most people wouldn't even think about registering a whole other entity to have their properties inside of that, especially if you're a homeowner, a normal person that just has one property in their name.
Primary residence.
Primary residency. And there's benefits to having that as well.
Absolutely.
The benefits to having it in your own name, if I'm not mistaken, is, for example, if you're a first-time homeowner, you get some discounts on the transfer fees, like 50%, sometimes even 40%. Up to, I think, 2 million rand, you don't pay profit tax.
Yeah,
when you
capital
sell,
gains
capital
tax.
gains tax. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
Yeah, so you can get up to 110% loan if you're a professional. I mean, let's say, for example, you just entered you just started as an employee, you have a small-ish salary, you can get up to 110% financing, where in a trust, you will never get 110% financing. So you can actually finance your acquisition cost or your transfer and registration cost, which helps, and you have less money down in the deal at the end of the day. So there is some advantages. I think the main advantage is it's easier. It's easier to buy a property in your own name. It's easier to get a loan in your own name. Those are all the benefits in buying a property in your own name. I think it's definitely, there's more cost involved setting up the right structures. I mean, most people can't afford to pay 10 or 15,000 rand for setup fees for a trust and then pay all the other fees for owning the property, the acquisition costs and so on. So it's definitely cheaper and easier to do in your own name. But again, I always tell the people that I work with, it's expensive, it's more difficult, but it's definitely worth focusing on the fundamentals from the beginning if you want to build a large property portfolio. But again, that's the investment side of property. If you want to use your property for business, like you mentioned, it makes absolute sense to do it because it's much easier, and there's different ways that you can reduce your taxes, there's different ways that you can benefit from it, and there's ways that you can save a lot of money compared to owning it in a trust. But if you want to focus on building a property portfolio, that's a completely different game.
It's a business, and you have
it's a business.
It's all of your business cash-generating assets. It
Absolutely.
has to be held by the company that generates or that needs the cash.
Absolutely.
One thing I actually just thought of when you own a property in your own name, for example, I have my own company. So I can't get 100% loan, I have to get 90% loan as mentioned. But above that, I have to pay the monthly fee of my bond out of my name, meaning I have to get the money into my name first. I have to pay income tax on that. So let's say the bond repayment is 20,000 rand. 20,000 rand plus income tax is what it's going to cost my company per month to have that building or to rent that building from me. So if you had the company registered just in your own name or just in the company's name, then it'll skip the income tax part, which is a proper 4,000 or 5,000 rand probably. So that's also something to take into account, that it's cool and all to have it in your own name. However, just know that before you pay the bank, you pay SARS.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so I think there's many ways. I'm not smart enough to explain all of these things. So I use professionals in their field, like a professional accountant, to help me manage these things, because I outsource stuff that I don't understand to people who know more than me. And I think that's a great thing to do if you're not really good with numbers or accounting or tax. Outsource that to someone that can actually help and explain these things so that it makes sense for your specific situation. So it depends on each and every situation. There's many tax benefits to doing that. I mean, if you have a company and you generate a lot of money, what can you do to reduce your taxes legally, and still doing that, you still grow your asset base? That's something that you can consider. And I mean, at the end of the day, owning property in your own name, your income tax bracket is much lower compared to a company's, which is 27%, or compared to 18 to 45%. So it depends on how much money you make, what type of industry you are in. There's many different ways to maneuver, or to move your money around from these different entities and to reduce taxes at the end of the day.
How many companies or how many properties do you have in your company's name?
So my structure works, I have a family trust, property trust, and then separate property trust where I own the properties in. So I use a property trust for 4 properties. So once I reach 4 properties, I'll create a new property trust.
I know on your YouTube channel you also speak about investing into property trusts and companies, easy equities or however. Have you found some good results from investing into stocks and whatnot?
Yeah, so great question. I really enjoy investing in stocks. I think that's something that not a lot of people understand. I'm still learning about it, but I have found quite a lot of success in it. Actually, I've made more cash or liquid cash in the stock market compared to owning property. Property is definitely a medium to long-term game, where stocks is as well, but I've received some great returns in the stock market in the last couple of years, but it takes a certain type of emotional intelligence to stay invested in the stock market.
And not just in general the stock market, but the housing part of stock market?
So not really. So I have some portions of my stock portfolio in REITs or property funds, but I mean, I'll rather invest in brick and mortar property. That's just an easy way to get started in property ownership, but obviously it's not actually the same. You have a real estate investment trust, which will pay you income on a quarterly basis. And technically you have fractional shares in some sort of property. I'm not sure if you know Easy Properties.
Yeah.
That's another example. That's fractional share ownership in an actual brick and mortar property. But at the end of the day, it's not the same thing. The main reason why I don't invest in property or property shares, because the main reason I only have a small percentage of my portfolio in property shares is because you can't use leverage. That's one of the major advantages of owning property or investing in property is leverage. You can use other people's money to buy an asset that can generate cash flow. You can use the cash flow to go on vacation or whatever it is. With stocks, you can't do that. So it's kind of, most people will start with 100 Rand or 200 Rand or 10,000 Rand. But getting to the big money takes time, because not everyone has, let's say, R1 million to invest in the stock market, because your risk is obviously bigger. So yeah, but that's something that I really enjoy. It's something that I talk on the channel quite a lot as well, but it's kind of difficult to explain everything in a simple way for people to understand.
I'd like to dig into YouTube and social media in general. From my side, obviously, I've been doing social media for quite a long time. I have a few pages. We have a YouTube page with 92,000 subscribers, another YouTube page with 18,000 subscribers.
Crazy.
TikTok with almost 400,000 subscribers, Instagram with 110,000 subscribers, and multiple other pages that aren't my personal pages that I run and own that also have hundreds of thousands of followers. And I found that having a social media platform is good if you have a product to sell, but the platform itself isn't really generating a lot of cash. What have you found with your YouTube channel? Is it worth making the videos for you?
Yeah, so well done. I saw some of your channels, and it's quite impressive to see the growth on them, and it's inspiring to see someone in South Africa actually creating these content, so that's very impressive. I think with YouTube specifically, you obviously get paid with AdSense, which is really not a lot of money. I think that alone is not worth creating a channel, in my opinion, depending on the niche that you do. But for me, that's not big money. I think it's if you have a product to sell, that's where the real capital inflow can come from. But obviously sponsorships and stuff like that, I haven't experienced too much sponsorships just yet. And the AdSense part of it, it's not a lot of money. So you have to have some sort of passion or some sort of, you need to be willing to share information for free for a long period of time before you can actually benefit from the content. That's what I found.
What is your CPM, your money that you make
I
per
have
1,000
no
views?
idea. No, so I have no idea. I can check on my phone. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, it would actually be very interesting to see because every niche has a different CPM.
Yeah.
For example, we have a tech review page and our CPM is like $4 per 1,000 views.
okay.
And I know financial channels can go up to like $11
Yeah.
per 1,000 views. My fitness channel gets like $1
Wow.
per 1,000 views. It's
Yeah.
trash, it's terrible, but the competition is sky high in fitness anyways.
Yeah, it depends. It goes up and down. So some months I do really well or average, and then some months it goes down and it just doesn't make sense. So it depends on your views and stuff, obviously. My stuff is in rands, so I can't really remember now, but I'll check. I've checked, but it's different all the time. So it's not the same amount, or is it something that stays exactly the same?
No,
it goes up
changes,
and
yeah. It depends on the video topic as well. So some
Okay.
video topics has a lot more sponsorships behind it. For example, investments,
Yeah.
easy equities and stuff like that. Companies are willing to put a lot more money onto the ad spend of those videos than
Okay.
they are on an educational video on how to buy the cheapest house.
Oh, yeah,
You know, it's like nobody wants to spend money on ads for people
Yeah.
who are looking at videos who aren't willing to spend money on
Yeah.
their ads. Like, that's kind of just the straight and forward of it. With property in general, when we look at buying a new house, when we look at buying an apartment, would you say that it's important to analyze deeper than just where the property is and how much the property cost? Do you pull up certain reports? Is there background information that you can get on the property? What would you say is the best strategy if you're going to go and buy a new property? What would you advise people to do and look at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's important to focus on research in general. I think just knowing the location itself is only one part of, buying a property. It obviously, again, depends on what you want to use the property for. But some of the stuff that I do is, it takes a bit of experience to know these things, but it's always a good idea to speak with a real estate agent, someone that's showing you the property. Ask their advice. If they are really worth their money, they will share valuable information with you. I'll take that information with a pinch of salt because they are obviously salespeople. But getting information from your real estate agent is a good way to get started. Something that I do on every property that I want to buy is to draw a property report. There's many different options available. One that I use is TPN. It's called Tenant Profile Network. You can simply draw an investor's valuation report on any address. I think it costs $38 to get the report, and it shows you comparable sales. It shows if the property is bonded. There's many different ways to see, the comparable sales in that street, for example. And it also shows you the average, the low and the high price of that property. So what I always like to do is, if the property, for example, is listed for 3 million rand, you can speak to your agent to find out if that's actually worth 3 million rand, because they normally valuate the properties differently because they obviously take commission, so they also need to make money from the sale. You can check the municipal valuation of the property. A basic rates and taxes bill will have a valuation on that as well. And then, of course, on the report itself, you can verify those valuations by seeing the minimum, the low and the high valuation of that property. So I always like to buy the property at a low price and register it for its high price. So there's equity that's forced into the deal.
That's really cool. I actually have the report of the property that we're going to buy now.
Did you use TPN or
I
Lightstone?
I used Property 24.
Okay. Did you pay for that?
I had to pay like
Yeah,
$99 or something.
It's the same principle, yeah.
How much do you pay for TP4 or
TPN is $38.
38? Okay,
Yeah.
I mean,
But that one probably has more information on it. Another one is Lightstone. I think that's quite expensive as well.
I've heard of Lightstone before.
The thing is, the reason I use TPN is, imagine you view 10 properties a week, 4 times a month, and you have to draw a report on all of them, and it's 100 rand. It's quite
How
a
many
lot.
properties do you view per week?
Depends, but quite a lot.
Hectic.
Yeah, so I try to view at least 2 or 3 a week. It takes some time to find a good
A
deal.
good buy. This took us 8 months.
Yeah, see, it
We
takes
looked
time.
at so many properties before
It's
buying this.
it's highly unlikely to view your first property and buy your first property.
Right, so have a look at that. Take your time. We're not in a hurry. We'll cut to his response soon.
Yeah, so this is quite similar to a TPN report. I think it actually has more information. There's obviously personal information from the person that owns this
Yeah, I'll
property.
obviously not share the report.
Just
online,
this
but
is so interesting always to see. This property was bought in 1995 for 285,000 rand. Damn.
It's sold for 2.2 million now, or 2.1 million.
I was born in 1995. I should have been buying property.
Dude, if only baby me knew.
So here it says it's basically exactly the same with this report. It gives you a low, it gives you a high, and this one gives you a high and a low and an estimated value. So ideally, if you can buy the property at its low, or even below its low. I mean, if you mentioned the price of the property,
2.1 million.
2.1 million rand. If its listing or the average listing price in that area is 3.6 million, you bought it for 2.1 million. There's a lot of equity in that property already. And above that, you can get an after repair value, which would be your high value. Once you fix it up again, paint it, put in new cupboards, your value will even be more than your original or estimated value range. So that's quite interesting. Okay.
Very cool though to pull
cool.
up a report like this. And I thought to myself, listen, if I'm going to be spending this amount of money on a new property or on a property and I'm a first time buyer, let me get as much information as possible.
Absolutely.
So I got the property report to show me everything from the beginning to the end of where this property came from, who owns the property, how many hands has gone through it. That's the first thing. The second thing is I took an electrician with me and a contractor for the second viewing. I was like, listen, this house obviously isn't in top condition, so there has to be some issues and I don't want to be caught off guard. So we took an electrician with us, we took a contractor with us, because I know this isn't a property that is in top-tip condition. Things will go wrong and I don't want to be caught off guard by, like you say, cracks in the foundation that I wasn't aware of, or DB boards that has to be completely redone and it's going to cost thousands of rands to do. So I think that was probably one of my moves that I think was really clever, is spend the 1,000 rand on the call out, get the guy to come and analyze and see whether there is some major issues, because you're most likely not somebody that's super knowledgeable on these things. You can't see when rooftops need to be replaced. You can't see whether a plug isn't in good condition or not. It looks fine from the outside, but is it really?
You need a professional's help.
Yeah.
It's having a team on your side. I mean, someone that's trustworthy that can tell you, listen, this thing is not in top condition. You'll have to focus on adding this to your budget or whatever.
And perhaps even walk through with a list and say door frames.
Absolutely, a property a property valuation report, basically doing it on your own and seeing, okay, the roof needs attention, the tiles are broken. Working out exactly where you'll have to spend money it's very important. But again, it's such a basic thing, but people tend to go the cheap route.
It's interesting to look at the house price markets as well, like how the prices change in the areas over time. We're actually on a downturn at the moment, which is good because the interest rates are sky high.
That's what needs to happen.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I mean, my parents have been speaking about the interest rate having to go up again for the last probably 10 years, and finally it started happening now. So we're probably going to be in this space for another 5 years or so. What do you think?
I think 2026 it should come down quite significantly. It depends. I think South Africa follows America quite closely. So if we want our currency to stay decently strong, we can't drop interest rates if America's interest rates are still high. We basically follow what they do.
Like America, I just registered an LLC in America.
Okay, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, we're expanding to America because, dollars.
Yeah, that currency advantage is huge. I mean, that purchasing power is huge.
I sell a program here for 500 rand. I sell a program there for $500.
Crazy.
Same program.
Same amount of work, much more money. Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting if you have this big desire, whatever it is, if your desire is big enough, you'll get to where you want to go. I think most of the time people start stuff and then they quit after it starts getting tough.
How do you stay consistent? How do you stay motivated? That's the question I get most often with my weight loss clients.
Yeah.
They start off very excited and then a few weeks in they're like, oh, but is it worth it? It's so difficult. But then I usually say, listen, it is hard to look in the mirror and not like what you see. But it's also hard to go train.
Absolutely.
It is hard to be in bed sick. It is also hard to eat healthy. Pick your heart. That is as simple as it is. It's hard to get up early in the mornings to do extra work on how to make videos. But it's also hard to not go anywhere in life.
Quote.
Write that down.
Yeah, great.
Louis, it was so nice to have you on this podcast. Thank you very much for joining. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed this. A lot of value in one small video. And we'll chat soon. As soon as we get that property registered and get into the property, I'll probably have you come and check it out with us and see all the headaches that we bought. I'm so excited for it.
Oh, thanks, Stefan. It was nice. Hopefully everything goes smooth sailing with the property.
I'm sure it will. 1, 2, 3, out.